Elena's hands trembled as she stared at the pregnancy test. 2 pink lines. She grabbed the sink to steady herself. "No," she whispered. "David, what did you do to me?" Her husband had been dead for 3 months. 3 months of silence. 3 months of questions that would never be answered, and now his child was growing inside her. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She almost ignored it. But something made her look. 1 new email. Subject line auction complete. Property acquired. Previous occupant Dr. David Hart. She stopped breathing. David. A cave. $250. He had been living in a cave while she waited for him to come home. And now, somehow that cave belonged to her. Subscribe now and stay until the end of this story. Comment below which city you are watching from. I want to see how far this journey takes us. Elena read the email 3 times before she believed it. Previous occupant Dr. David Hart. She laughed. The sound came out wrong. Some broken and sharp, bouncing off the bathroom tiles like something that didn't belong there. "A cave?" she said out loud. "You were living in a cave." She remembered the night she placed that bid. 3 weeks ago, 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, unable to stop scrolling, unable to do anything but exist in the hollow space David had left behind. The listing had appeared under a category called Distressed and Unconventional Assets. A photograph of a rock face. A price so low it seemed like a joke. $250. She had bid on it out of spite. A bitter, grief-soaked act of defiance aimed at a dead man who would never know. Now the joke had landed. And she, was the punchline. Elena gripped the pregnancy test in one hand and her phone in the other. 2 impossible realities. 1 bathroom, no escape from either. Her phone rang. The screen showed her mother's name. Margaret Hart, calling for the 4th time today. Elena answered before she could stop herself. "Finally," her mother said. "I've been trying to reach you all morning. Are you all right? You sound strange." "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine. Have you eaten?" "You need to eat, Elena. Grief is no excuse for neglecting yourself." Elena closed her eyes. "Mom, I'm pregnant." Silence. Complete, absolute silence. "Mom?" "Pregnant." Margaret's voice had gone flat. "You're telling me you're pregnant?" "Yes." "David's child." "Of course David's child. Whose else would it be?" "I didn't mean it like that. I just—" Margaret paused. Elena could hear her breathing, recalculating, adjusting. "When did you find out?" "About 10 minutes ago." 10 minutes? You've known for 10 minutes and you're already telling me. Have you even processed this? Have you seen a doctor? Have you thought about what this means?" "I'm processing it right now, Mom, in real time, with you." "Don't be sarcastic. This is serious. You're a widow. You're pregnant. You're alone. This changes everything." Elena wanted to hang up. She wanted to throw the phone against the wall and watch it shatter. Instead, she said, "I know it changes everything. Come home. Come stay with us. Your father and I have room. We can help you through this." "I'm not coming home." "Elena, I said no." Another pause. Longer this time. "What are you going to do?" Margaret asked quietly. Elena looked at the email still glowing on her phone screen. The cave. David's cave. A place she had never seen, never known about, never been invited to. "I don't know yet," she said, "but I'll figure it out." She hung up before her mother could respond. The next morning, Elena walked into her office for the first time in 2 weeks. The architecture firm occupied the top 3 floors of a glass tower in downtown Denver. Clean lines, open spaces, everything designed to project success, efficiency, progress. She had helped design this building. She had believed in what it represented. Now it felt like a lie she had told herself. Richard Chen, her boss, spotted her before she reached her desk. "Elena?" He crossed the floor with the deliberate stride of a man who measured time in billable hours. "You're back. Good. We need to talk about the Morrison project." "I'm not back." He stopped. "Excuse me." "I need a leave of absence." Richard's expression shifted. She watched him calculate the impact, weigh the inconvenience, consider his options. "A leave of absence," he repeated. "Now, with the Morrison deadline in 2 weeks." "Yes." "That's not possible. You know that's not possible. You're the lead architect on this project. The client specifically requested you." Elena felt something inside her snap. Not break. Snap. Like a rubber band stretched too far. "My husband is dead, Richard. I just found out I'm pregnant. I'm taking a leave of absence. This is not a negotiation." Richard opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "How long? I don't know." You don't know. You're the lead architect on a $12 million project and you don't know how long you'll be gone. That's correct? Elena, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. For the first time in months, I am being completely reasonable. She picked up a cardboard box from the supply closet and began placing personal items inside. A photograph, a plant, a coffee mug David had given her 3 years ago with the words, "Build something beautiful," printed on the side. Richard watched her pack. His face had gone red. If you walk out now, I can't guarantee your position will be here when you get back. Elena tucked the mug into the box. Then don't guarantee it. She walked out of the building without looking back. Sarah Chen, no relation to Richard, was waiting outside. Sarah had been Elena's best friend since architecture school. 15 years of late nights, shared deadlines, whispered complaints about impossible clients. She was the only person Elena had told about David's distance, about the silence that had grown between them, like a wall neither could climb. I saw you through the window, Sarah said. Looked like you were having a moment. I quit. You quit your job. I'm taking a leave of absence, which might be the same thing. Sarah stared at her. Okay, wow, that's... Okay, are you all right? I'm pregnant. Sarah's mouth fell open. For 3 full seconds, she said nothing. Then, holy shit. Yeah. David's... Why does everyone keep asking that? Sorry, it's just... This is a lot. You're pregnant. You quit your job. What else? Did you win the lottery? Elena thought about the email. The cave. The impossible coincidence of it all. Something like that, she said. They sat in a coffee shop 3 blocks from the office. Elena told Sarah everything. The auction listing. The photograph of the rock face. The name at the bottom of the description. Dr. David Hart. Sarah listened without interrupting. When Elena finished, she leaned back in her chair and exhaled slowly. Let me get this straight. Your dead husband was secretly living in a cave. You accidentally bought that cave for $250, and now you're pregnant with his child. That's the summary, yes. Elena, this is insane. I know. This is literally the plot of a movie, a weird indie movie that wins awards at Sundance. I know. Sarah leaned forward. What are you going to do? Elena wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. The warmth seeped into her palms, grounding her in the present moment. I'm going to go see it. See what? The cave. I'm going to drive up there, and see what David was doing. Why he chose that place. Why he never told me. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Are you sure that's a good idea? You're pregnant? The mountains are dangerous. What if something happens? Then something happens. Elena. I have to do this, Sarah. I have to understand. I spent 3 years wondering why my husband pulled away from me. I spent 3 months wondering if I ever really knew him at all. Now I have a chance to find out. I can't walk away from that. Sarah reached across the table and took Elena's hand. Okay, but promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you'll call if you need anything. I promise. And take a satellite phone. Cell service in the mountains is garbage. Elena smiled for the first time in weeks. I'll take a satellite phone. 3 days later, Elena loaded her car and drove out of Denver. The city fell away behind her. Suburbs gave way to foothills. Foothills gave way to mountains. The road climbed higher, twisted, tighter, narrowed until it felt like the earth was squeezing the civilization out of her. Her phone lost signal 4 hours into the drive. She had expected this. She had prepared for it. But the silence still felt like a door closing. The pavement ended. Gravel crunched under her tires. Then dirt. Then a narrow track that looked like it hadn't been maintained in years. Elena gripped the steering wheel tighter. The car bounced over rocks and ruts. Twice she had to stop and check the printed directions she had brought, comparing them to landmarks that barely existed. By late afternoon, doubt had begun to creep in. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe she should turn around. Now drive back to Denver, find a normal way to grieve and a normal way to raise a child. Then she came around a bend in the road and saw it. The rock face from the photograph. The wooden frame around the entrance. Real, solid, waiting. Elena parked the car and sat there, engine idling, hands still on the wheel. Okay, David, she said to the empty seat beside her. Show me what was so important. She killed the engine and stepped out into the mountain air. The cold hit her first. Sharp, clean nothing like the city. Then the silence. Not empty silence. Full silence. Wind through distant trees. Birds somewhere above. The mountain breathing. Elena walked toward the entrance slowly. Her boots crunched on loose gravel. Her heart pounded in her chest. The wooden frame was impressive up close. Solid craftsmanship, precise joints. Someone had taken their time building this. David, she thought. David built this. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The temperature changed immediately, cooler but not cold. Stable, like stepping into a different season. Her eyes adjusted slowly. Light filtered in from the entrance, revealing a space that made no sense. This was not a hole in the rock. This was not a desperate shelter. This was a home. Elena moved deeper, her hand trailing along the stone wall. Smooth in places, shaped by tools, shaped by intention. She found shelves carved into the rock, holding empty jars arranged with precision. She found a sleeping platform built into a natural ledge layered with blankets. She found a work table made from a single slab of stone, its surface worn by years of use. "You lived here," she whispered. "You actually lived here." A surge of anger flooded through her, hot and bright and overwhelming. "You lived here, and you never told me. You built all of this, and you never invited me to see it. What the hell, David? What the hell were you thinking?" Her voice echoed off the stone walls. The cave absorbed her anger, held it, gave nothing back. Elena pressed her palms against her eyes. She would not cry. She had cried enough. There was no one here to comfort her, no one to tell her it would be all right. She forced herself to breathe. In, out, in, out. When she opened her eyes again, she saw the notebooks, stacked in a recessed niche near the back of the chamber. Dozens of them, leather covers. Careful organization. She pulled out the first one and opened it. David's handwriting stared back at her. Small, precise, unchanged from the letters he used to write her when they were first dating. The early pages were scientific. Temperature readings, humidity measurements, notes on airflow and ventilation, the dry, methodical voice of a researcher documenting an experiment. But as Elena kept reading, the tone shifted. The cave maintains a stable temperature of 58 degrees, regardless of external conditions. The thermal mass of the stone absorbs heat during the day and releases it at night. This is basic physics, but most people have forgotten it. They've forgotten how to work with the earth instead of against it. Elena turned more pages. The ventilation system is complete. Air flows in through the lower entrance, warms as it passes through the main chamber and exits through the upper shaft. No mechanical parts, no electricity required. Just physics, just patience. That more pages, more observations, and then suddenly something different. I wonder what Elena would think of this place. She builds buildings for a living. She understands structure, load-bearing walls. The importance of foundations, but she's been trained to depend on systems that can fail. Power grids, water mains, supply chains that stretch across continents. She's never had to imagine what happens when those systems stop working. Elena's hands began to shake. I've tried to talk to her about this, about fragility, about dependence. She doesn't want to hear it. She thinks I'm paranoid. Maybe I am. But I've seen what happens when people put their faith in things they don't understand. I've seen communities collapse in days when the trucks stop coming. She hasn't, and I don't know how to show her without scaring her. Elena set the notebook down. Her heart was racing. Her breath was coming too fast. She picked up another notebook, flipped through the pages until she found what she was looking for. It's been 2 years since I left Denver. 2 years since I stopped pretending that academic research was going to change anything. Elena thinks I abandoned her. Maybe she's right. But I didn't leave because I stopped loving her. I left because I couldn't watch her sleepwalk toward a disaster she refused to see. Tears were streaming down Elena's face now. She didn't bother to wipe them away. I should have tried harder to explain. I should have brought her here, shown her what I was building, helped her understand why it matters. But I was afraid. Afraid she would laugh. Afraid she would think I'd lost my mind. Afraid that if she rejected this, she would be rejecting me. So I said nothing, and the silence grew, and now I don't know how to break it. Elena closed the notebook and hugged it against her chest. "You idiot," she whispered. "You complete idiot. I wouldn't have laughed. I would have listened. I was waiting for you to tell me something real." But David couldn't hear her. David was dead. She sat there for a long time, surrounded by his work, his words, his ghost. When she finally picked up the notebooks again, she read more carefully, more completely. She learned about the water collection system, the food storage, the emergency supplies. She learned about his research into sustainable living, his experiments with off-grid technologies, his vision of a different kind of future. And then she found the entry that changed everything. It was dated 6 months before his death. The handwriting was shakier than usual, as if David had written it in a hurry. "I've made a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. I thought I had to choose between this work and Elena. I thought she couldn't be part of this world, but I was wrong. I've spent 3 years preparing this place for a future that might never come, and in the process, I've lost the only person who made the present worth living. Elena's hands were trembling so badly she could barely hold the notebook. The cave is ready now. The systems are stable. Everything works the way it should. There's nothing more I need to do here alone. I'm going back to Denver. I'm going to try to explain all of this to Elena. I'm going to ask her to come see what I've built. I'm going to ask her to give me another chance. Elena let out a sound that was half sob, half scream. I don't know if she'll listen. I don't know if too much damage has been done. But I have to try. I've been a coward for too long. She deserves to know the truth. She deserves to decide for herself whether this life makes sense. And if she says no, at least I'll know I gave her the choice. The entry ended there. Elena stared at the page. Her vision blurred with tears. Her chest ached with a grief she hadn't known she was capable of feeling. David had been coming back to her. He had been on his way home. And then he had died. A hiking accident, the authorities said. His body found at the bottom of a ravine miles from any marked trail. No witnesses, no explanation. He had been trying to reach her, and he hadn't made it. Elena curled up on the stone floor of the cave and wept. She wept for David. She wept for herself. She wept for all the conversations they never had, all the chances they wasted, all the love that got buried under silence and fear. When the tears finally stopped, she lay there in the darkness listening to the sound of her own breathing. The baby moved inside her, a flutter, barely perceptible, the first movement she had felt since learning she was pregnant. Elena pressed her hand against her stomach. I feel you, she whispered. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. She didn't know how long she lay there. Time moved differently in the cave. There was no clock, no schedule, no external rhythm to follow, just stone and silence and the steady beating of her heart. Eventually she sat up, wiped her face, looked around at the space David had created. For the first time since arriving, she really saw it, not as evidence of his abandonment, not as proof of his obsession, but as what it actually was. A gift. He had built this place for a future they were supposed to share. He had designed every system, tested every solution, refined every detail with her in mind. The notebooks made that clear. He had been waiting for the right moment to bring her here to show her what was possible, to offer her a choice. He just hadn't lived long enough to make that offer. Okay, David, Elena said out loud. I'm here now. I'm listening. The next morning, Elena drove down to the nearest town to make a phone call. The town was barely a town, a gas station, a general store. A church with a steeple that had seen better days. Population maybe 300 if you counted generously. Her phone found a signal at the edge of the parking lot. 3 bars. Enough. She called her mother. Elena, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for days. I'm in Colorado, Mom, in the mountains. The mountains? What are you doing in the mountains? You're pregnant, for God's sake. You should be home resting, taking care of yourself. I found something David left behind. Silence. Then cautiously, what do you mean something he left behind? A house. He built a house in a cave. He was living there for years. A cave? Margaret's voice went flat. Your husband was living in a cave. It's not what you think. It's not primitive or crazy. It's actually incredible. He designed heating systems, water collection, ventilation. He spent years perfecting it. Elena, honey, listen to yourself. This sounds like something a troubled person would do. David was always a little eccentric, but he wasn't troubled, Mom. He was right. Right about what? The end of the world. Margaret's tone sharpened. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Those ideas of his about society collapsing, about people being too dependent on technology. I warned you about him when you first started dating. I said, you said a lot of things, you always do. The words landed harder than Elena intended, but she didn't take them back. I'm not trying to hurt you, Margaret said quietly. I'm trying to protect you. That's all I've ever tried to do. I know, but I don't need protection right now. I need to understand. I need to figure out what David was trying to tell me and why he couldn't say it out loud. And you think you'll find those answers in a cave? Elena looked out at the mountains, still capped with snow even in late September. Massive, ancient, indifferent to human drama. I already have, she said. When Elena returned to the cave, there was a truck parked near the entrance. An old Ford rusted at the edges, caked with mountain mud. A man stood beside it, arms crossed, watching her approach. He was in his 60s, weathered face, hands that had spent decades working outdoors. He wore a flannel shirt and a baseball cap with the logo faded beyond recognition. Elena parked next to his truck and stepped out carefully. "Can I help you?" she asked. The man studied her for a long moment. "You the one who bought this place?" "I am." "Thought so. News travels fast around here." He extended a hand. "Tom Riley. I live about 10 miles down the ridge." Elena shook his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive. "Elena Hart." "Hart." Tom nodded slowly. "Related to the fellow who used to live here." "He was my husband." Something shifted in Tom's expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of a different kind. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said. "David was a good man. Strange, but good." Elena felt her chest tighten. "You knew him." "Knew him well as anybody around here did. He wasn't much for socializing, but he helped me fix my water pump a few winters back. Wouldn't take payment. Said neighbors help neighbors." "That sounds like him." Tom glanced toward the cave entrance. "I came by to see who'd taken over the place, wanted to make sure it wasn't developers or some government type looking to cause trouble." "No developers, just me. Just you." Tom's eyes dropped to her stomach. She was wearing a loose jacket, but the pregnancy was starting to show. "And one more looks like," Elena placed a hand on her belly. "His child, David's child." Tom was quiet for a moment, then he said, "He would have liked that. Talked about family sometimes when he'd had a drink or two. Said he had regrets. Said there was someone he should have brought here a long time ago." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "He was coming back for me when he died. He was on his way to ask me to come see this place." Tom nodded slowly. "That tracks. He'd been different the last few months before the accident, more at peace, like he'd finally figured something out." He paused. "You planning to stay?" The question hung in the air between them. Elena looked at the cave entrance, the wooden frame David had built with his own hands, the stone that had stood for thousands of years before him and would stand for thousands of years after. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. "I came here for answers. I'm still finding them." Tom reached into his truck and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Here, my number. The signal's garbage most places, but there's a spot about 2 miles east where you can get through. If you need anything, supplies, help someone to talk to you, call." Elena took the paper. "Thank you. Don't mention it." Tom climbed back into his truck. "Like I said, neighbors help neighbors." David understood that. "I figure you will too." He drove away, leaving a cloud of dust that settled slowly over the mountain road. Elena stood there watching until the truck disappeared around a bend. Then she turned and walked back into the cave. That night, Elena lay on the sleeping platform David had built, wrapped in blankets that still faintly carried his scent. The silence was absolute. No traffic, no sirens, no neighbors moving behind walls. Just stone and darkness and the steady rhythm of her own breathing. She had never experienced quiet like this. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like relief. Her hand rested on her stomach. The baby had moved twice more since that first flutter. Each time felt like a message, a reminder that she was not alone. "I wish you could see this," she whispered to David's ghost. "I wish you could know that I finally understand." But David was gone, and understanding had come too late. Or had it, Elena thought about Tom Riley, about the community that existed in these mountains, sparse but connected, about the notebooks filled with knowledge David had spent years accumulating. She thought about the child growing inside her, David's child, their child. She thought about the cave designed to withstand whatever the world might throw at it, self-sufficient, resilient, built not for escape but for endurance. And slowly, tentatively, a different kind of thought began to form. What if this wasn't an ending? What if this was a beginning? Elena closed her eyes. Sleep came easier than it had in months, deep and dreamless, held by stone that had weathered centuries of storms. When she woke, the first light of morning was filtering through the entrance. The baby kicked against her palm. Elena smiled. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's see what happens next." 2 weeks passed faster than Elena expected. She had planned to stay 3 days. Maybe 4. Just long enough to understand what David had built and why. But the cave had a way of bending time, of making the outside world feel distant and irrelevant. Each morning she woke with the intention of leaving, and each night she found another reason to stay. The baby was growing. She could feel it now, not just flutters, but actual movements, a presence that demanded acknowledgement. At night, lying on the platform David had built, she would press her hand against her stomach and whisper to the child inside her, "Your father made this place for us. I didn't know it then, but I know it now." On the 15th day, her phone rang. She had driven down to Tom's signal spot 2 miles east of the cave to check her messages. There were 17 voicemails from her mother. She ignored them all and was about to drive back when the phone buzzed in her hand. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. "Elena, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days." "I know. The signal up here is impossible." "Your mother called me. She's losing her mind. She thinks you've joined a cult or something." Elena laughed despite herself. "It's not a cult. It's a cave." "I told her that. She didn't find it reassuring." Sarah paused. "How are you really doing? And don't give me the 'I'm fine' answer. I want the truth." Elena looked out at the mountains. The truth was complicated. The truth was that she had found something here she didn't know she was missing. The truth was that for the first time since David's death, she felt like she was moving towards something instead of running from it. "I'm staying," she said. "Staying where? At the cave?" "Yes." "For how long?" "I don't know. Maybe permanently." Silence on the other end. Elena could hear Sarah processing, recalculating, adjusting her understanding. "Elena, you're pregnant. You're 5 months pregnant. You can't give birth in a cave." "I'm not planning to give birth in a cave. I'm planning to figure out what comes next. And I can't do that in Denver, surrounded by everything that reminds me of what I lost." "So you're going to do it in the mountains, surrounded by everything that reminds you of your dead husband." The words hit harder than Sarah intended. Elena felt them land, felt the sting of truth beneath the concern. "Yes," she said quietly, "because here I can finally understand him. And maybe by understanding him I can figure out who I'm supposed to be without him." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Okay, I don't love this plan, but I trust you. Just promise me you'll be careful, and that you'll call if you need anything. Anything at all. I promise." "I mean it, Elena. Don't disappear on me." "I won't." She hung up and sat in the car for a while, watching the sun move across the sky. Sarah was right to be worried. This was not a rational decision. This was not the kind of choice that made sense on paper. But sense had gotten her nowhere. Maybe it was time to try something else. 3 days later, the first officials arrived. Elena heard the engine before she saw the vehicle. A white SUV climbing the narrow road, moving with the careful precision of people who didn't belong here. She stepped out of the cave entrance and watched it approach. 2 men emerged. Gray suits, clipboards, the unmistakable posture of bureaucracy. Ms. Hart, the taller one, spoke first. His voice was polite but practiced. "I'm Agent Morrison from the County Planning Office. This is Agent Delgado. We need to speak with you about this property." Elena crossed her arms. "What about it?" "We've received reports that someone is occupying an unregistered structure in a protected wilderness zone. Are you aware that this dwelling violates multiple zoning regulations?" "I'm aware that my husband lived here for years without anyone raising concerns." Morrison glanced at his clipboard. "Dr. David Hart. Yes, we have records. His occupancy was tolerated given the remote location and his research credentials, but with new ownership, we're required to conduct a formal assessment." "Assessment of what?" "Safety, habitability, environmental impact." Morrison looked past her toward the cave entrance. "May we come inside?" Elena didn't move. "Do you have a warrant?" The 2 men exchanged glances. Delgado, the shorter one, shifted uncomfortably. "This is a preliminary visit," Morrison said. "We're not here to cause trouble, Ms. Hart. We just need to document the condition of the structure and determine whether it meets minimum standards for human habitation." Minimum standards. Elena felt something harden inside her. "This place has maintained a stable temperature through every season for years. It has natural ventilation, water collection, food storage. It was designed by a scientist who spent a decade studying sustainable living." "What are your minimum standards based on?" Morrison's expression tightened. "Regulations, Ms. Hart, building codes, safety requirements that exist for good reasons." "Have you measured the temperature inside, the humidity, the air quality?" "Not yet. That's why we're here." "So you're assessing something you haven't examined based on standards that weren't designed for this type of structure." Elena let the words hang. "That doesn't sound like an assessment. That sounds like a conclusion looking for justification." Delgado cleared his throat. "Ms. Hart, we understand this is an unusual situation, but there are procedures we have to follow. If you refuse to cooperate, we'll have to escalate this to the state level." "Then escalate it." Both men stared at her. This was clearly not the response they had expected. "Ms. Hart," Morrison began, "I'm not refusing to cooperate. I'm asking you to do your job properly. Come back with actual measuring equipment. Come back with experts who understand passive solar design and thermal mass and natural ventilation. And come back with an open mind, because if you're just here to check boxes and declare this place unfit, you're wasting my time and yours." She turned and walked back into the cave without waiting for a response. Behind her, she heard Morrison say something to Delgado in a low voice. Car doors opened and closed. The engine started faded, disappeared down the mountain. Elena leaned against the stone wall, heart pounding. She had just declared war on a bureaucracy. She had no idea if she could win, but for the first time in years, she felt like fighting. Tom Riley showed up the next morning with coffee and news. "Word is you told those government boys to take a hike," he said, handing her a thermos. "That true?" Elena took the coffee gratefully. "Something like that. How did you hear?" Morrison stopped at the gas station on his way back to Denver. "Told Frank at the counter that the crazy pregnant lady in the cave was going to be a problem." Tom grinned. "Frank called me. I called a few others. By tonight, half the county will know." "Great. Now I'm the crazy pregnant lady." "You're the lady who didn't back down. That counts for something around here." Elena sipped the coffee. It was strong and bitter, exactly what she needed. "They're going to come back, probably with more authority and less patience." "Probably. Question is, what are you going to do about it?" "I don't know yet. Fight, I guess. Prove that this place is safer than whatever they think it should be." Tom nodded slowly. "David kept records, detailed ones. He showed me some of his data, once temperature charts going back years. You got those notebooks, right?" "I have them." "Then use them. Those government types love documentation. Give them so much data, they choke on it." Elena looked at Tom. She barely knew this man, but he was treating her like an ally, like someone worth helping. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't owe me anything." Tom was quiet for a moment. His eyes went distant, looking at something she couldn't see. 20 years ago, my wife got sick. Cancer. The doctor said she had 6 months, maybe a year. Said there was nothing they could do except make her comfortable." He paused. "David was new to the area then, just starting his research. He heard about Linda and showed up at our door one day with a box of books. Medical journals, alternative treatments, things the doctors hadn't mentioned because they weren't standard protocol." Elena felt her throat tighten. "Did any of it help?" "Some of it. Enough that she lived another 4 years instead of 1. Enough that we had time to say goodbye properly." Tom met her eyes. "David didn't have to do that. He barely knew us. But he believed in doing things differently when the normal way wasn't working. And he was right." "I didn't know that about him." "There's probably a lot you didn't know. He wasn't good at talking about himself, but he was good at showing up when it mattered." Tom finished his coffee. "That's why I'm here, because he would have wanted someone to show up for you." Elena's eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. "Thank you?" "Don't mention it. Just focus on winning this fight. And if you need help, you know where to find me." He drove away, leaving Elena alone with the mountain and the silence. But she didn't feel alone anymore. The letters started arriving a week later. Tom brought them up from town, official envelopes with county and state seals. Elena opened them one by one, reading the carefully worded threats. Notice of violation, request for documentation, deadline for compliance. Each letter was more aggressive than the last. They wanted inspection reports, engineering assessments, and environmental impact statements. They wanted her to prove that a structure built into a mountain was as safe as a suburban house with a mortgage and a homeowners association. Elena spread the letters across David's work table and stared at them. For a moment, despair crept in. She was one person, pregnant, alone, fighting a system designed to crush anything that didn't fit its categories. Then she looked at the notebook stacked beside her. David had spent years collecting data, temperature readings, humidity measurements, structural observations, every detail documented with the precision of a scientist who knew his work would eventually need to be defended. He had prepared for this moment. He just hadn't been here to see it through. "Okay," Elena said out loud. "If they want documentation, I'll give them documentation." She worked through the night organizing David's notes into categories, cross-referencing dates and measurements, building a case that would be impossible to dismiss. When morning came, she had 70 pages of evidence and a clarity of purpose she hadn't felt in months. Sarah called that afternoon. "Your mother is threatening to come to Colorado." Elena groaned. "Please tell me you're joking." I wish I was. She called me this morning in full crisis mode. Apparently, you haven't returned her calls in 3 weeks, and she's convinced you're either dead or being held hostage by mountain people. Mountain people. Her words, not mine. I tried to explain that you're fine. You're just working through some things, but she's not listening. She says if she doesn't hear from you by Friday, she's booking a flight. Elena closed her eyes. The last thing she needed right now was her mother descending on the cave with her opinions and her expectations and her relentless need to control. I'll call her, she said. Tonight. Good. And Elena, maybe ease her in gently. Don't lead with, I'm permanently moving into a cave to raise my baby off-grid. Start with something like, I'm getting fresh air and perspective. Work your way up. Noted. I'm serious. Your mother is already halfway to a nervous breakdown. Don't push her over the edge. Elena hung up and sat with the phone in her hand for a long time. She didn't want to call her mother. She didn't want to explain herself, justify her choices, defend a life that was still taking shape. But Sarah was right. Avoiding the conversation would only make it worse. She dialed the number before she could change her mind. Margaret answered on the first ring. Elena, is that you? Are you all right? I'm fine, Mom. Fine. You've been unreachable for weeks. I've left dozens of messages. I've been worried sick. Do you have any idea what you've put me through? Elena felt the familiar weight of her mother's anxiety pressing down on her, the expectation that she should feel guilty, the assumption that her choices were burdens rather than decisions. I'm sorry I didn't call sooner, she said carefully. Things have been complicated. Complicated how? What's happening up there? Sarah said something about a cave, but that can't be right. You're not actually living in a cave, are you? I am. Silence. Complete stunned silence. Mom? You're living in a cave. Margaret's voice had gone dangerously flat. You're 6 months pregnant, and you're living in a cave. 5 months, and yes. Have you lost your mind? I haven't lost anything. I found something. Something David built. Something that matters. David. The name came out like a curse. Of course this is about David. Even dead, that man is still pulling you away from everything that makes sense. Elena felt her temper flare. David didn't pull me anywhere. I made a choice. My choice, and I'm asking you to respect it. Respect it. You want me to respect the fact that my only daughter is throwing away her life to play survivalist in the wilderness. You want me to respect the fact that my grandchild is going to be born in a hole in the ground. The baby is not going to be born in the cave, Mom. I'm not stupid. Then what's the plan, Elena? What's the actual plan? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've had some kind of breakdown and you're not thinking clearly. Elena gripped the phone so hard her knuckles went white. The plan is to figure out what happens next. The plan is to stop pretending that the life I had in Denver was actually working. The plan is to honor the work David did, and maybe, just maybe, build something real out of the ruins of what we lost. That's not a plan, that's a fantasy. Then let me have my fantasy, Mom. Let me figure this out without you constantly telling me I'm wrong. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer, older, more tired than Elena had ever heard her. I'm scared for you, that's all. I'm scared that you're going through something I can't help with, and I'm scared that you're going to get hurt, and I'm scared that I'm going to lose you the way we lost David. Elena felt the anger drain out of her, replaced by something more complicated. Love and frustration and grief all tangled together. You're not going to lose me, Mom, I promise. Then let me come see you. Let me see this place you're so determined to defend. Maybe if I understand it, I can stop being so afraid. Elena hesitated. The thought of her mother in the cave and David's space in this world she was just beginning to understand felt overwhelming. But maybe that was exactly why it needed to happen. Okay, she said finally. Come. The storm hit 3 days before Margaret was scheduled to arrive. Elena had watched the clouds building all morning, thick and dark and moving fast. Tom had called with a warning, a major system coming down from the north, the kind that dropped temperatures 40 degrees in an hour and buried roads under feet of snow. You should come down to town, he said. Wait it out somewhere safe. I'll be fine. Elena, this isn't a regular storm. This is the real thing. Power's going to go out. Roads are going to close. If something happens up there, no one can get to you. I know, that's kind of the point. Tom was silent for a moment, then, you're testing it. The cave, David's systems. You want to see if they work. Yes. That's either brave or crazy. Probably both. Tom sighed. All right. But keep that satellite phone charged, and if anything feels wrong, anything at all, you call me." "I will." The storm arrived at dusk. Elena stood at the cave entrance and watched it come. Wind tore through the valley, carrying snow that fell sideways, thick and relentless. The temperature dropped so fast she could feel it in her bones. She stepped back inside and sealed the door. Immediately, the world changed. The howling wind became a distant murmur. The cold retreated, stopped at the threshold by stone that had been absorbing heat for months. Elena stood in the center of the main chamber and listened. Silence. Stability. Balance. David's systems were working. She built a fire in the hearth he had designed, watching as the heat spread slowly through the space absorbed by rock instead of escaping into the air. The temperature inside held steady 58 degrees, exactly as his notebooks had predicted. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. She slept better that night than she had since David died. Deep, dreamless sleep held by stone that had weathered centuries of storms without flinching. When she woke, the fire had burned to embers, but the cave was still warm. The baby kicked against her palm, strong and insistent. "We made it," Elena whispered. "Your father knew what he was doing." She spent the day reading David's notebooks, testing the systems he had built, marveling at the precision of his design. Every detail served a purpose. Every choice had been thought through. By the second day, the storm showed no signs of stopping. Elena checked her satellite phone. The battery was holding. She called Tom. "How's it going up there?" His voice crackled through the static. "Better than expected. The cave is performing exactly as David designed." "Good to hear. Meanwhile, the town is falling apart. Power's out everywhere. The shelter at the church is packed. People are burning furniture to stay warm." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. "How long until the power comes back?" "No idea. Could be days. The main lines are down all across the county." Tom paused. "You know, some folks are asking about you, wondering if the crazy lady in the cave might know something they don't." Elena looked around at the steady warmth of the space she now called home. "Tell them they can come up when the road's clear. I'll show them what I've learned." "I'll do that. Stay safe, Elena." "You too." The storm lasted 4 days. When it finally stopped, Elena stepped outside to find a world transformed. Snow lay thick across every surface, brilliant white under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. The road was buried. The trees were bent under the weight of ice. Everything familiar had been erased and rewritten, but the cave entrance remained clear, protected by the natural overhang David had chosen so carefully. Elena laughed out loud, the sound echoing off the rock face. "You genius?" she said to the empty air. "You absolute genius?" Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Your mother's flight is canceled. All of Denver is shut down. Are you okay?" Elena typed back, "I'm better than okay. I'm finally starting to understand." She turned and walked back into the cave, leaving the chaos of the outside world behind. The systems worked. David had been right, and now she had to figure out what to do with that knowledge. The visitors began arriving 3 days after the roads cleared. First came the neighbors, the ones Tom had mentioned. Families who had spent the storm huddled in shelters, watching their modern homes fail around them. They climbed the mountain in pickup trucks and old jeeps bundled in layers, their eyes wide with curiosity and something that looked almost like hope. Elena welcomed them, without ceremony. "This is what a cave can do," she said, gesturing at the stable warmth of the space. "This is what David spent years building, not to escape the world, but to survive it." They touched the stone walls. They studied the heating system. They asked questions that Elena answered as honestly as she could, pointing them toward the notebooks, encouraging them to observe rather than simply believe. Some left skeptical, others left thoughtful. A few stayed for hours talking about what they had experienced during the storm, the fear they had felt. The vulnerability they hadn't known was there. "We never questioned it," one woman said. Her name was Maria. She had 2 children under 10 and a husband who worked at the power plant. The electricity, the heating, the way everything just works. We never asked what happens when it doesn't. "That's what David asked," Elena said. "Every day for years. And this is the answer he found." Maria looked around the cave with new eyes. Could anyone build something like this? Not exactly like this. Every site is different, but the principles are the same. Work with the land, not against it. Store heat. Control airflow. Design for resilience, not convenience. Elena paused. "David wrote all of it down. I'm still learning myself, but I can share what I know." That night after the last visitors left, Elena sat alone in the cave and realized something had shifted. She had come here looking for answers about David. Now she was becoming the answer herself. The officials returned the following week. This time there were 4 of them, and they brought equipment, temperature sensors, humidity monitors, air quality testers. Morrison was there, his expression carefully neutral. Behind him stood a woman Elena didn't recognize, older, sharp-eyed, carrying herself with the authority of someone who made final decisions. "Ms. Hart," Morrison said, "this is Dr. Patricia Vance from the State Environmental Office. She'll be conducting the formal assessment." Elena nodded. "Welcome, I've prepared documentation." She handed over the 70-page file she had assembled from David's notebooks, temperature data spanning years, airflow measurements, structural observations. Dr. Vance took it without comment and began flipping through the pages. The team spent 4 hours in the cave. They measured everything. They tested every system. They asked questions that ranged from technical to skeptical. Elena answered all of them. When they finished, Dr. Vance pulled her aside. "This is remarkable work," she said quietly. "Your husband was a serious scientist." "He was. He just didn't care about credentials. He cared about results." "The results speak for themselves. This structure is more stable than most buildings in the state." Vance glanced at Morrison, who was packing up equipment with barely concealed frustration. "The county may not like it, but I can't find anything here that justifies condemnation. You've met every standard we tested for." Elena felt something loosen in her chest. "Does that mean they'll leave me alone?" "It means they'll have to find a different argument, and based on what I've seen today, I'm not sure they have one." Vance handed back the documentation file. "Keep this safe. You may need it again." "Thank you." Vance nodded and walked back to join her team. As they drove away, Elena stood at the entrance and watched until the vehicles disappeared down the mountain. She had won. Not completely, not permanently, but enough for now. The baby kicked hard as if celebrating. Elena pressed her hand against her stomach and smiled. "We did it," she whispered. "Your father's work is safe." Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Flight rebooked. Arriving Thursday. Please tell me there's somewhere to stay that isn't a hole in the ground." Elena laughed despite herself. "There's a nice inn in town," she typed back. "I'll meet you there." The real test was coming. Not from the government or the weather or the doubts in her own mind. The real test was showing her mother what she had found, and convincing her that this life, this impossible, unconventional David-designed life, was exactly where she was meant to be. Elena set down the phone and began preparing for the most difficult conversation of her life. Thursday arrived faster than Elena was ready for. She had spent the last 3 days preparing, not the cave, but herself. Rehearsing conversations in her head, anticipating objections, building walls around the parts of her new life that felt too fragile to defend. None of it helped. At 2 p.m, she drove down to the inn in town and parked outside. Her mother's rental car was already there, a silver sedan that looked painfully out of place among the mud-splattered trucks and weathered jeeps. Elena sat in her car for a full minute before getting out. "You can do this," she whispered. "She's your mother. She loves you. She just doesn't understand." The door to the inn opened before Elena reached it. Margaret Hart stood in the doorway, smaller than Elena remembered. Older, somehow wrapped in a wool coat that probably cost more than most people in this town made in a week. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her makeup was flawless. Her eyes were red from crying. "Elena?" Margaret's voice cracked on the name. "Oh, thank God you're all right." She crossed the distance between them and pulled Elena into a hug so tight it hurt. Elena stood stiff for a moment, surprised by the intensity of her mother's embrace. Then something softened inside her thigh, and she hugged back. "I'm fine, Mom. I told you I was fine." "I know what you told me, but telling and seeing are different things." Margaret pulled back, holding Elena at arm's length, examining her with the critical eye of a mother who had spent 34 years cataloging every detail of her daughter's existence. "You look thin. Have you been eating?" "I've been eating." "You look tired. Have you been sleeping?" "Mom?" "I'm just asking. A mother has a right to ask." Margaret's eyes dropped to Elena's stomach. The pregnancy was unmistakable now, a rounded curve that no jacket could hide. "And the baby, everything is okay with the baby. Everything is okay. The doctor in town says I'm healthy. The baby is healthy. We're both fine." Margaret nodded, but her expression remained unconvinced. "A doctor in town? What kind of doctor? What are his credentials? Has he delivered babies before?" Her credentials: Dr. Sarah Chen, 30 years of experience, delivered half the children in this county. Elena took a breath. Mom, I didn't come here to be interrogated. I came to take you to the cave, to show you what David built, to help you understand. Margaret's face tightened. I'm not sure I want to understand Elena. I'm not sure there's anything that could make this situation acceptable. Then why did you come? The question hung in the air between them. Margaret looked away, her jaw working, her eyes bright, with something that might have been tears or might have been anger. Because you're my daughter, she said finally. Because I couldn't stay away, even when staying away would have been easier. Because I had to see for myself what was worth losing everything you had in Denver. Elena felt the words land like stones in her chest. I didn't lose everything. I made a choice. A choice. Margaret's voice went flat. You call this a choice? Abandoning your career. Abandoning your home? Abandoning everything we worked to give you so you could live in a hole in the ground like some kind of hermit. It's not a hole in the ground, and I'm not a hermit. If you would just come and see it. Fine. Margaret straightened her spine, that familiar gesture of a woman preparing to endure something unpleasant. Fine. Show me. Show me this miraculous cave that's worth more to you than the life you left behind. The drive up the mountain was silent. Elena focused on the road, navigating the twists and turns she had come to know by instinct. Margaret sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed straight ahead. 20 minutes passed without a word. Finally, Margaret spoke. Your father wanted to come. Elena glanced at her. He did. I told him to stay home. I said I would handle this. Margaret paused. He didn't argue. He never argues. But I could tell he was disappointed. Why didn't you let him come? Because I needed to see this without him softening everything, without him telling me to be patient, to be understanding, to give you space. Margaret's voice hardened. Your father has spent his entire life being patient and understanding. Look where it got us. Our daughter living in a cave, pregnant with a dead man's child, refusing to come home. Elena gripped the steering wheel tighter. Dad understands more than you think. Your father understands nothing. He just pretends to understand because it's easier than fighting. And you think fighting is the answer? I think someone in this family needs to face reality. Someone needs to tell you that this is not sustainable. This is not a life. This is a grief reaction that's gone too far. Elena pulled the car to a stop. They had reached the end of the road. We're here, she said. Margaret looked out the window. Her face went pale. That's it, she whispered. That's the cave? That's it? Margaret didn't move. She sat frozen, staring at the rock face, the wooden frame around the entrance, the ancient stone that had stood for millennia before either of them was born. It looks like a tomb, she said. Elena opened her door. Come inside, then tell me what it looks like. The moment Margaret stepped through the entrance, something changed in her expression. Elena watched it happen. The shift from resistance to confusion, from confusion to reluctant curiosity, from curiosity to something that looked almost like wonder. It's warm, Margaret said. How is it warm? The stone absorbs heat during the day and releases it at night. David designed the entrance to maximize solar gain in winter and minimize it in summer. The temperature stays around 58 degrees year-round. Margaret walked deeper into the space, her heels clicking against the stone floor. She touched the walls, the shelves carved into rock, the platform where Elena slept. He built all of this over 6 years, every system, every detail. Margaret stopped in front of the work table. David's notebooks were stacked there, organized, waiting. She reached out but didn't touch them. These are his research, his observations, everything he learned about sustainable living. Elena moved to stand beside her mother. He wasn't running away, Mom. He was building something he wanted to share. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, smaller, less certain. He never talked about this. When you two were together, he never mentioned any of it. He tried. I didn't listen. Elena felt the familiar ache of regret. I thought he was being paranoid. I thought his ideas were impractical. I didn't understand that he was trying to protect us. Protect you from what? From this. Elena gestured at the stone walls around them. From a world that could stop working at any moment. From systems that seem reliable until they're not. She paused. There was a storm last week. 4 days. The power went out across the county. People in town were burning furniture to stay warm. And I was here in this cave perfectly comfortable, perfectly safe. Margaret's expression shifted again. Something cracked behind her eyes. "Your father and I went through something like that once," she said quietly. "Before you were born. A blizzard in Boston. We were newlyweds living in a tiny apartment with no backup heat. The power was out for 6 days." Elena stared at her mother. "You never told me that." "It wasn't the kind of thing we talked about. We got through it. We moved on. But I never forgot how scared I was. How helpless." Margaret's voice trembled. "I promised myself I would never feel that way again, that I would build a life so stable, so secure that nothing could shake it. And you did." "I thought I did. Then David came along and suddenly you were making choices I couldn't control. Moving to Colorado, marrying a man who talked about collapse like it was inevitable, pulling away from everything I tried to give you." Elena felt something shift inside her, not anger, not frustration, something softer, sadder. "You weren't trying to control me," she said slowly. "You were trying to protect yourself from feeling helpless again." Margaret's face crumpled. For the first time, Elena could remember her mother looked old, fragile, human. "I've been so scared," Margaret whispered. "Ever since David died. Ever since you told me about the baby, I've been terrified that I was going to lose you too." Elena reached out and took her mother's hand. "You're not going to lose me." "How can you promise that you're living in a cave, Elena? You're about to have a baby in the middle of nowhere. Anything could happen. Anything could go wrong." "Anything can go wrong anywhere." That's what David understood. That's what he was trying to prepare for. Elena squeezed her mother's hand. "I'm not asking you to approve of this. I'm asking you to trust me, to believe that I'm capable of making decisions for myself and my child." Margaret was quiet for a long time. Tears streamed down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "I don't know how to do that," she said finally. "I don't know how to stop being afraid." "Neither do I, but I'm learning." Elena gestured at the cave around them. "David left me a manual for survival, for resilience, for learning to live with uncertainty instead of running from it. And you think that's enough?" "I think it's a start." They stood there together in the silence of the cave, mother and daughter separated by decades of misunderstanding and connected by something deeper than either of them could name. Then Margaret did something Elena never expected. She sat down on the stone platform and took off her expensive shoes. "Okay," she said. "Teach me." The next 3 days were unlike anything Elena had experienced. Margaret stayed at the inn but drove up to the cave every morning. She read David's notebooks. She asked questions, some hostile, some genuinely curious. She watched Elena move through the routines she had developed, learning the rhythms of life in a space designed for resilience rather than convenience. It wasn't easy. They argued, they cried, they sat in stubborn silence for hours at a time. But something was changing. On the second evening, Margaret called her husband. Elena listened from across the room as her mother described the cave, the systems, the logic behind David's choices. Her voice was different than Elena had ever heard it. Thoughtful, open, almost impressed. "You should see it, Robert. I know what I said before, but this is different than I expected. It's not crazy, it's actually quite remarkable." Elena smiled despite herself. Progress. On the third day, Tom Riley came by with news. "There's a meeting tonight in town," he said. "Community gathering. People want to talk about what happened during the storm, what went wrong, what could be done different." "What does that have to do with me?" Elena asked. "They want you to speak. Tell them about the cave, about David's research, about what you've learned." Elena felt her stomach tighten. "I'm not a public speaker." Neither was David, but he helped people anyway, one person at a time. Tom glanced at Margaret, who was studying David's temperature charts with intense concentration. "Seems like you've got his gift." Elena looked at her mother, looked at the notebooks, looked at the life she was building in a place that wasn't supposed to be habitable. "What time is the meeting?" 7 o'clock? Church community room?" "I'll be there." The community room was packed. Elena stood at the front, facing 50 faces she barely knew. Farmers, shopkeepers, teachers, families with young children, old couples who had lived in these mountains their entire lives. And in the back row, Margaret Hart watching with an expression Elena couldn't read. "I'm not an expert," Elena began. Her voice shook slightly. "I'm not a scientist or an engineer or a survival specialist. I'm an architect from Denver who inherited a cave from her dead husband." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. "But David was an expert. He spent 6 years studying how to live without depending on systems that can fail, and he left behind everything he learned." Elena held up one of the notebooks. This is his research, temperature data, ventilation designs, water collection methods. He wrote it all down because he believed knowledge should be shared. She talked for an hour. She answered questions. She explained concepts she was still learning herself. She pointed people toward resources, toward ideas, toward ways of thinking about resilience that most of them had never considered. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Maria, the woman with 2 young children who had visited the cave after the storm, stood up. "My husband and I have been talking," she said. "About what happened when the power went out, about how scared we were, about how we never want to feel that helpless again." She looked at Elena. "We want to learn. We want to build something different, and we want you to teach us." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "I can teach you what David taught me. That's all I can offer." "That's enough," Maria said. "That's more than enough." The meeting broke up slowly, people clustering in small groups, talking in low voices about possibilities they had never considered before. Several approached Elena, shaking her hand, thanking her, asking questions she promised to answer. Margaret was the last to reach her. "That was impressive," she said quietly. "You were impressive." Elena shrugged, suddenly exhausted. "I just repeated what David wrote." "No, you translated it. You made it real for people who needed to hear it." Margaret paused. "I was wrong about you, Elena. I was wrong about a lot of things." "Mom, let me finish. I spent so many years trying to protect you from uncertainty that I never taught you how to face it. David did that. This place did that. And I'm sorry I tried to take it away from you." Elena hugged her mother right there in the middle of the community room, surrounded by strangers who were becoming something more. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means everything." Margaret left the next morning. Elena drove her to the airport 2 hours of winding roads that felt shorter than they should have. At the security checkpoint, Margaret turned and took Elena's hands. "I'm going to call every week, whether you answer or not." "I'll answer. And I'm going to worry. That's not going to stop." "I know. But I'm not going to try to change your mind anymore. This is your life, your choice, your child." Margaret's voice broke. "Just promise me you'll be careful, and that you'll call when the baby comes." "I promise." Margaret pulled her into one final hug, holding on longer than usual, as if trying to memorize the feeling. Then she walked through the security gate and disappeared into the crowd. Elena stood there for a long moment, watching the space where her mother had been. Something had shifted between them. Not completely healed, not fully resolved, but different, better. She drove back to the mountains with the windows down, breathing in the cold, clean air. Home. The word felt different now. Not like a place she was running to, like a place she belonged. 2 weeks later, Elena was organizing David's research files when she found the letter. It was tucked inside a notebook she hadn't opened yet, hidden in a pocket she hadn't noticed. A single envelope sealed with her name written on the front in David's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Elena," the letter began. "If you're reading this, something has happened. Either I made it home and gave this to you myself, or I didn't and you found it some other way. I'm hoping for the first option, but I'm writing this letter in case of the second." Elena's vision blurred with tears. She blinked them away and kept reading. "I've spent 6 years building this place, preparing for a future that might never come. And for most of that time, I told myself I was doing it for humanity, for knowledge, for science, but that was a lie. I was doing it for you. Every system I designed, every problem I solved, every cold night I spent alone in this cave wondering if I had made the right choice. It was all for you, because I wanted to give you something that couldn't be taken away, a place that would be safe no matter what happened to the world outside." Elena pressed her hand against her mouth, trying to hold back the sob that was building in her chest. "I should have told you. I should have brought you here. I should have trusted that you would understand. But I was afraid that you would think I was crazy, afraid that you would choose the life we had over the life I was trying to build, afraid that if I showed you who I really was, you would stop loving me." The tears were falling freely now, dripping onto the paper, smearing the ink. "I know now that I was wrong. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. You always were. And if you're reading this, if you found this place, if you stayed long enough to discover this letter, then maybe there's still hope. Maybe you can finish what I started. Maybe you can turn this cave into something more than a shelter. Maybe you can turn it into a home." Elena turned the page. "There's one more thing I need to tell you, something I should have said a long time ago. When I left Denver, when I pulled away from our marriage, I told myself I was protecting you, giving you the chance to live a normal life without being dragged into my obsessions. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. I was too scared to fight for us. Too scared to face the possibility that you might reject everything I believed in. The letter continued on the next page. If you're reading this, I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for one day, not for one moment. And if there's any way I can still reach you, even from wherever I am now, I want you to know that you were right too. About connection, about not facing the future alone, about the importance of people over preparations. I just wish I had figured it out sooner. The final paragraph was shorter, written in a shakier hand. The cave is yours now. Do with it what you think is best. But please don't make the same mistake I made. Don't isolate yourself. Don't try to carry this alone. Find your people. Build your community. Create the kind of life I was too afraid to fight for. And know that wherever I am, I'm proud of you. I always was. I love you. David. Elena set down the letter and wept. She wept for David. For herself. For the years they had lost and the future they would never share. She wept for the baby growing inside her who would never know its father except through notebooks and letters and stories told in a cave. She wept until there were no tears left. Then she picked up the letter, folded it carefully, and placed it in her pocket. David had given her a message, a mission, a purpose, and she was going to honor it. The following week, Elena made a decision. She drove down to town and met with Tom Riley Maria and her husband, Dr. Sarah Chen, and a dozen others who had expressed interest in learning from David's research. I want to start something, she said. A group, a community, people who want to learn how to be more resilient, how to depend less on systems that can fail, how to help each other when things go wrong. What kind of group? Tom asked. I don't know yet. A study group maybe, or a cooperative. Somewhere people can share knowledge, share resources, share skills. Elena looked around the table. David believed that survival wasn't about individuals stockpiling supplies in bunkers. It was about communities learning to take care of each other. I want to build that. That sounds like a lot of work, Maria said. Are you sure you want to take that on with the baby coming and everything? I'm sure. Elena placed her hand on her stomach. The baby kicked against her palm. This is what David would have wanted, and it's what I want too. The conversation continued for hours. Ideas were proposed, debated, refined. By the end of the evening, they had the beginnings of a plan. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't complete. But it was a start. As Elena drove back up the mountain that night, the stars were out in full force, spread across the sky like scattered diamonds. She thought about David, about his letter, about the life he had imagined and the life she was actually building. He had wanted her to find her people, to build her community, to create something that would last. She was doing that now, not alone, not isolated, but surrounded by neighbors who were becoming friends, strangers who were becoming family. The cave waited for her at the end of the road, its entrance lit by the moon, its stone walls holding the warmth of the day. Elena stepped inside and closed the door behind her. We're doing it, she whispered to the empty space. We're actually doing it. The baby kicked in response. Elena smiled through her tears. Wherever David was, she knew he was watching, and she knew he was proud. The first meeting of the Mountain Resilience Cooperative happened on a Wednesday evening in early December. Elena stood at the front of Tom Riley's barn, facing 23 people who had driven from all corners of the county to be there. Some she recognized from the community meeting at the church. Others were strangers drawn by word of mouth, or curiosity, or the lingering fear left behind by the storm. She was 7 months pregnant now. The baby had grown heavy inside her, a constant presence that reminded her why this work mattered. Thank you for coming, she said. Her voice was stronger than she expected. I know some of you traveled a long way to be here. I know some of you think this might be a waste of time. I'm going to try to prove you wrong. A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. My husband spent 6 years preparing for a future most people don't want to imagine. He wasn't predicting the end of the world. He was preparing for the moments when the world we've built stops working the way we expect. Elena held up one of David's notebooks. This is what he learned, and tonight I'm going to share it with you. She talked for 2 hours. She explained thermal mass and passive heating. She demonstrated water collection systems using drawings David had made. She walked them through the logic of self-sufficiency not as an escape from community, but as a foundation for it. When she finished, an older man in the back raised his hand. This all sounds good in theory, he said. His name was Harold. He had farmed the same land for 40 years. But what happens when theory meets reality? What happens when the snow's 3 feet deep and the roads are closed and you're all alone up there in that cave? Elena smiled. Then I do what David designed the cave to do. I wait, I stay warm, I survive. She paused. But I'm not planning to be alone. That's why we're here. That's why I'm asking you to join me. Because surviving isn't about one person in one cave. It's about all of us learning to take care of each other. Harold was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. My grandfather used to say the same thing back before electricity and highways and all the rest. Neighbors helped neighbors. That's how you got through. Exactly, Elena said. We're not inventing something new. We're remembering something old. The meeting ended with 15 people signing up to be founding members of the cooperative. They agreed to meet every 2 weeks, share skills, and start building the network David had envisioned but never lived to create. As Elena drove home that night, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Real, tangible hope. The phone call came 3 days later. Elena was organizing supplies in the cave when her satellite phone buzzed. She checked the screen. A number she didn't recognize. Area code Denver. She answered anyway. Mrs. Hart, this is Detective Marcus Webb with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. Do you have a moment to talk? Elena's heart stopped. What is this about? It's about your husband, ma'am, David Hart. We've been reviewing the file on his death, and some new information has come to light. Elena sat down heavily on the stone platform. Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach. What kind of information? I'd rather discuss this in person if possible. Would you be available to come to Denver this week? I'm 7 months pregnant and I live 4 hours from Denver. Can you give me some idea of what this is about? Detective Webb was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was careful, measured. Mrs. Hart, we don't believe your husband's death was an accident. The words hit Elena like a physical blow. What are you saying? I'm saying we have evidence that suggests your Hart was murdered. Elena couldn't breathe. The cave walls seemed to close in around her. The baby kicked hard against her ribs as if sensing her distress. Murdered, she repeated. The word felt foreign in her mouth. David was murdered. That's what we believe, yes. I understand this is a shock, but we need your help, Mrs. Hart. We need to understand who might have wanted your husband dead. Elena's mind raced through possibilities. Enemies, rivals, anyone who might have wanted to hurt David. I don't know, she said. I don't know who would do this. He was a researcher. He lived in a cave. He wasn't involved in anything dangerous. His research, Webb said. What exactly was he researching? Sustainable living, off-grid systems, self-sufficiency. Nothing that would attract negative attention, no controversial findings, no conflicts with anyone. Elena thought about the government officials who had visited her, about Morrison and his clipboard, about the bureaucracy that had tried to shut down the cave. There were people who didn't like what he was doing, she said slowly. But enough to kill him, I can't imagine that. I'd still like to hear about it, every detail you can remember. Webb paused. Can you come to Denver, Mrs. Hart, or should I come to you? Elena looked around the cave. David's cave, the place where he had spent his final years, the place where someone had apparently decided he needed to die. Come to me, she said. I'll tell you everything I know. Detective Webb arrived 2 days later. He was younger than Elena expected, early 40s maybe, tired eyes, the look of a man who had seen too much and stopped being surprised by any of it. Tom Riley had insisted on being present. You shouldn't talk to police alone, he had said, especially not about something like this. Elena didn't argue. They sat in the main chamber of the cave, sunlight filtering through the entrance. Webb looked around with the careful attention of someone cataloging evidence. This is quite a place, he said. Your husband built all of this over 6 years. Every system, every detail. And he was living here when he died. Yes? Webb pulled out a notebook, old school, pen and paper. Walk me through the last time you spoke to him. Elena closed her eyes, reaching back through months of grief and confusion. It was about 2 weeks before he died. A phone call, brief. He said he was working on something important and that he would explain soon. Did he say what he was working on? No, I assumed it was his research. He was always working on something. Did he seem worried, afraid? Elena considered the question. Not afraid. Excited, maybe, like he was close to finishing something. Webb wrote something in his notebook. We found his body at the bottom of a ravine approximately 6 miles from here. The initial investigation concluded he fell while hiking, but we've recently obtained new evidence that suggests he was pushed. Elena felt sick. What evidence? I can't disclose that yet, but I can tell you that we're treating this as a homicide. Webb looked at her directly. Mrs. Hart, did your husband have any enemies? Anyone who might have wanted him silenced? Silenced. What do you mean, silenced? I mean someone who didn't want his research made public. Someone who might have seen his work as a threat. Elena thought about the letters from the county. The officials who had tried to shut down the cave. The systems David had been challenging with every page of his notebooks. He was critical of certain industries, she said slowly. Power companies, utility providers, anyone who profited from people's dependence on centralized systems. Did he ever receive threats? Not that I know of, but we weren't talking much near the end. Webb nodded. What about his research? Did he share it with anyone? He shared some of it with me, after his death when I found the notebooks. Where are those notebooks now? Elena hesitated. Something in Webb's question felt wrong. Too eager. Too focused. Why do you need to know? Webb's expression didn't change. Because they might contain information relevant to the investigation. Because whoever killed your husband might have been looking for something. Tom Riley spoke up for the first time. Or someone might still be looking. Webb turned to look at him. What do you mean? I mean that if David was killed for his research, whoever did it probably didn't find what they were looking for, which means they might come back. Tom met Elena's eyes. Which means you might be in danger. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She hadn't considered that. She had been so focused on building the community, on honoring David's legacy, that she hadn't stopped to think about who might not want that legacy to exist. I need to see those notebooks, Webb said. If there's something in them that someone was willing to kill for, we need to know what it is. Elena stood up. Her legs felt unsteady, but her voice was firm. The notebooks stay here. They're my husband's life work. I'm not handing them over to anyone until I know what's really going on. Webb's expression hardened slightly. Mrs. Hart, I'm trying to help you. Then help me by finding out who killed my husband, but those notebooks are not leaving this cave. Webb studied her for a long moment, then he nodded. All right, but I'll need access. I'll need to read through them, look for anything that might point to a motive. You can read them here, with me present. That's not standard procedure. Neither is living in a cave, Elena said. We're going to have to adapt. Despite herself, Elena saw the corner of Webb's mouth twitch, almost a smile. Fair enough, he said. I'll be back tomorrow. After Webb left, Elena sat alone in the cave, her hand resting on her stomach. David had been murdered. Someone had pushed him off a cliff because of something he knew, something he had written, something in those notebooks that was worth killing for. She looked at the stacks of leather-bound journals, suddenly seeing them differently. Not just as research, as evidence, as a target. The baby kicked hard. I know, Elena whispered. I'm scared too. She picked up her satellite phone and called Sarah. Elena, is everything okay? No, Elena said. Everything is very far from okay. She told Sarah everything, the phone call, the detective, the revelation that David's death was not an accident. Sarah was silent for a long time after Elena finished. What are you going to do? I don't know. Stay here, protect the research, try to figure out what David knew that was worth killing him over. Elena, this is dangerous. You should come home. You should get out of there. This is my home now, and I'm not running. You're 7 months pregnant. You're alone in the mountains. Someone murdered your husband, and you might be next. This is not the time to be stubborn. I'm not being stubborn. I'm being smart. Elena took a breath. If I run, if I hide, if I let them win, then David died for nothing. Everything he built means nothing. I can't let that happen. Even if it puts you in danger. Even then. Sarah was quiet again. When she spoke, her voice was different. Resigned, maybe. Or accepting. Okay, what do you need from me? I need you to make copies of everything. I'm going to scan David's notebooks and send them to you. If something happens to me, I want the research to survive. Elena, promise me you'll protect it. A long pause. Then, I promise. Elena hung up and immediately started working. She spent the next 3 days scanning every page of David's notebooks. Hundreds of pages. Thousands of observations. A lifetime of research compressed into digital files. Detective Webb returned as promised. He sat in the cave for hours reading, taking notes, asking questions Elena couldn't always answer. Your husband was thorough, he said at one point. Obsessive, even. He preferred to call it dedicated. Same thing sometimes. Webb flipped another page. Did he ever mention anything about industrial espionage companies trying to steal his work? No, he was very open about sharing his research. He wanted people to learn from it. Maybe that was the problem. Elena looked at him. What do you mean? I mean that there are industries that don't want people learning how to live without them. Power companies, utility providers, real estate developers. Webb set down the notebook. If everyone could build a cave like this, what would happen to the housing market, to the energy sector, to all the systems that profit from dependence? You think David was killed by a corporation? I think someone saw his work as a threat, and when he started preparing to share it more broadly, they decided to stop him. Elena remembered David's final letter, his plan to return to Denver, to bring her here, to go public with everything he had learned. He was coming back for me, she said quietly. When he died, he was on his way to ask me to come see this place. And someone stopped him before he could. The realization settled over Elena like a weight. David hadn't just been killed. He had been silenced, prevented from completing the mission that had driven him for years. And now that mission was hers. I'm going to finish his work, she said. I'm going to share everything he learned. Make it public. Make it impossible to suppress. Webb looked at her with something that might have been admiration or concern. That could make you a target. I'm already a target. At least this way I'm a target with a purpose. 2 weeks passed without incident. Elena continued leading the Resilience Cooperative. The group had grown to 30 members, now meeting regularly, sharing skills, building the network David had envisioned. She kept scanning documents. Keep sending files to Sarah. Keep preparing for a confrontation she could feel coming but couldn't see. Then on a Tuesday morning in late December, Tom Riley drove up to the cave with a newspaper in his hand. You need to see this. Elena took the paper. The headline made her blood run cold. Controversial researcher's widow accused of fraud. County officials question legitimacy of cave dwelling. The article was devastating. It quoted anonymous sources claiming that Elena had forged David's research, that the cave systems didn't work as advertised, that she was running a scam to attract donations and publicity. This is lies, Elena said. All of it. Every word. I know that. You know that. But most people reading this don't. Tom's face was grim. Someone's trying to destroy your credibility before you can share David's work. Elena scanned the article again, the anonymous sources, the careful phrasing that stopped just short of actionable defamation, the timing exactly when she was preparing to go public with the research. This is them, she said. Whoever killed David. They're trying to discredit me. That's what I figured. Elena's hands were shaking, not with fear, with anger. They're not going to win. I'm not going to let them win. What are you going to do? Elena grabbed her coat and her keys. I'm going to fight back. She drove to Denver that same day. 8 months pregnant, alone, furious, she walked into the offices of the Colorado Mountain News and demanded to speak with the editor. The receptionist stared at her. Ma'am, do you have an appointment? I don't need an appointment. I need to speak to whoever published that article about me. I'm sorry, but my name is Elena Hart. I'm the woman you called a fraud this morning, and I'm not leaving until someone explains to me why you printed lies without checking a single fact. The receptionist picked up the phone. 5 minutes later, Elena was sitting across from James Morrison, not the county official, the editor of the paper. Different Morrison, same problem. Mrs. Hart, I understand you're upset. Upset doesn't begin to cover it. You published an article calling me a fraud based on anonymous sources. Did you verify any of their claims? Morrison shifted in his chair. We have procedures. Did you visit the cave? Did you measure the temperature? Did you test any of the systems? Our sources were credible. Your sources are lying, and I can prove it. Elena pulled out a folder. Temperature data spanning 6 years. Independent assessments from state environmental officials. Testimonials from neighbors who sheltered in the cave during the storm. Every claim in your article can be disproved with facts. Morrison took the folder reluctantly. He flipped through the pages, his expression growing more uncomfortable with each one. This is comprehensive. My husband was a scientist. Comprehensive was his specialty. Elena leaned forward. Print a retraction, correct the record, or I will sue this paper for every dollar it's worth. Mrs. Hart, I can't just... Yes, you can. You printed a story without verification. Now you can print the truth. Elena stood. You have 48 hours. After that, I'm going to the competition, and to my lawyer. She walked out without waiting for a response. The retraction appeared 3 days later. It was buried on page 12, shorter than Elena would have liked, but it was there. The newspaper acknowledged errors in their reporting. They apologized for relying on unverified sources. They promised to do better. It wasn't a victory, but it was a start. Detective Webb called that afternoon. "I saw the retraction. Nice work." It wasn't enough. "No, but it tells us something. Whoever's behind this is getting nervous. They're making mistakes." "How do we use that?" "We wait, we watch, we let them get more nervous." Webb paused. "In the meantime, I have news. We found a witness." Elena's heart jumped. "A witness to what?" "To your husband's death. A hiker who was in the area that day. He saw 2 men with David on the trail about an hour before the body was found." "Did he identify them?" "He's working with a sketch artist now, but he described one of them as wearing a jacket with a logo, a company logo." "Which company?" "Grid First Energy, the second largest power utility in Colorado." Elena felt the pieces clicking into place. Grid First, the company that had been fighting renewable energy initiatives for years. The company that had lobbied against off-grid living regulations. The company that had everything to lose if David's research went public. "They killed him," she said. "They killed David to protect their profits. We don't have enough to prove that yet, but we're getting closer." Webb's voice hardened. "And Elena, if I'm right about this, you need to be very careful. These are not people who play fair." "I know. Do you have somewhere safe you can go until this is resolved?" Elena thought about the cave, about the community she was building, about the baby growing inside her. "I'm not running," she said. "Not anymore." Christmas came to the mountain. Tom Riley organized a gathering at his barn. 50 people from the cooperative plus their families. More than Elena had expected. More than she had dared to hope. They strung lights. They shared food. They sang carols that echoed off the wooden walls. Elena stood in the middle of it all, 8.5 months pregnant, surrounded by people who had become something like family. Maria's daughter tugged at her hand. "Mrs. Elena, is Santa going to visit your cave?" Elena smiled. "I don't think Santa knows where my cave is." "Then how will he bring presents for the baby?" Elena knelt down, which was harder than it used to be. "I think the baby already has the best present. All of you." The little girl looked confused. "People aren't presents." "The best ones are." Yet, later that night, after the gathering ended and the lights were dim, Elena sat alone by the fire in Tom's barn. Sarah had called earlier full of news about Denver and worried questions about Elena's health. Margaret had called too, her voice soft with a new kind of acceptance. Even her father had gotten on the line saying little but meaning everything. For the first time since David's death, Elena felt like she wasn't carrying the weight alone. Tom sat down beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "Hell of a year," he said. "Hell of a year," she agreed. "You know, when David first showed up around here, people thought he was crazy, living in a cave, talking about systems collapse. Most folks wrote him off. What changed? He helped people, one at a time. Fixed Linda's water pump, taught the Morrison kids how to build a greenhouse, shared what he knew without expecting anything in return." Tom sipped his coffee. "By the time he died, half the county owed him something. They just didn't know how to say it." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "I wish I had known him better, the way you did." "You knew him in ways we never could. That letter he wrote you, the one you found in the cave that wasn't for us, that was for you." Tom met her eyes. "He loved you, Elena. Every decision he made, even the ones that seemed crazy, came from that love." "I know that now. I didn't know it then." "That's how it usually works. We figure things out too late. The question is what we do with that understanding once we have it." Elena placed her hand on her stomach. The baby was quiet now, sleeping maybe, or just listening. "I'm going to finish his work," she said. "I'm going to make sure everyone knows what he discovered, and I'm going to raise our child in the home he built for us." Tom nodded slowly. "David would have liked that." "I hope so." "I know so." Tom finished his coffee and stood. "Get some rest. That baby's going to be here before you know it." Elena drove back to the cave through silent roads dusted with fresh snow. The stars were brilliant overhead, spread across the sky like promises. When she reached the entrance, she paused before going inside. She looked up at the rock face, the ancient stone, the home that had become her whole world. "Merry Christmas, David," she whispered. The wind carried her words away, but somehow she felt like he heard. The call from Detective Webb came on New Year's Eve. "We have enough to make arrests," he said. 2 employees of Grid First Energy. They've been linked to payments made just before your husband's death. Elena gripped the phone. What happens now? They'll be arraigned next week. It'll be a long process, but we have a strong case. Webb paused. There's something else. The investigation is widening. We think there may be others involved, higher up in the company. The people who gave the orders? Exactly. It may take time, but we're going to find them. Elena closed her eye. Justice. Real justice for David. She had almost stopped believing it was possible. Thank you, she said, for not giving up. Thank your husband. His notebooks gave us everything we needed. He documented more than just research. He documented threats, communications, patterns that pointed directly at Grid First. Webb's voice softened. He knew someone might come for him. He just didn't expect it to happen the way it did. He was preparing for everything. He was preparing for you, so you could finish what he started. Elena hung up and sat in the silence of the cave. It was almost midnight. The new year was about to begin. She thought about everything that had happened. Finding the cave, reading the notebooks, building the community, fighting the lies, discovering the truth. David had set all of this in motion years before she even knew it was happening. He had left her a roadmap, a purpose, a reason to keep going. And now with his killers facing justice and his research ready to change the world, she finally understood what he had been trying to tell her all along. The future wasn't something to fear, it was something to build. At midnight, Elena stood at the entrance of the cave watching fireworks explode over the distant town. The baby kicked hard as if celebrating. Happy New Year, Elena whispered. This is our year, yours and mine. She placed both hands on her stomach, feeling the life inside her, the future waiting to be born. The cave stood solid behind her. The community stood with her. And somewhere she knew David was watching. Proud, peaceful, free. The contractions started at 3 a.m. on January 15th. Elena woke with a gasp, her body curling instinctively around the pain. For a moment, she didn't understand what was happening. Then the realization hit her like a wave. The baby was coming. She reached for her satellite phone, hands shaking, and called Tom Riley. It's time, she said when he answered. The baby is coming. How far apart are the contractions? I don't know, 10 minutes, maybe less. I'm on my way, don't move. Elena hung up and forced herself to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way the book said, the way Dr. Chen had taught her. Another contraction hit stronger than the first. She cried out, gripping the edge of the stone platform. The sound echoed off the cave walls, bouncing back at her like a question she couldn't answer. Was she ready for this? Was she strong enough? David's letter was still in her pocket. She had carried it every day since finding it. Now she pulled it out, unfolding the worn paper with trembling fingers. I'm scared, she whispered to his words. I'm so scared. But she kept reading, and somewhere in the familiar handwriting she found the courage to keep breathing. Tom arrived 40 minutes later with Dr. Chen in the passenger seat. How are you doing? Dr. Chen asked, moving immediately to Elena's side. I've been better. Let me check you. The doctor's hands were gentle, professional, reassuring. After a moment, she looked up with a calm smile. You're about 5 centimeters dilated. We have time, but not a lot. Can you make it to the clinic? Elena shook her head. I want to stay here, in the cave, where David built for us. Elena, this is your first birth. There could be complications. Then we'll deal with them, but I'm not leaving. This is where my baby is supposed to be born. Dr. Chen exchanged a glance with Tom. Something passed between them, an acknowledgement of Elena's determination. All right, Dr. Chen said. Then we do this here. Tom, I need hot water, towels, all the supplies from my bag. Tom nodded and moved. Elena grabbed Dr. Chen's arm. Thank you for understanding. I don't understand, Doctor, Chen said honestly, but I trust you, and I'm going to make sure you and this baby come through safely. The hours that followed were the longest of Elena's life. The contractions came faster, harder, each one a wave of pain that threatened to pull her under. She lost track of time, lost track of everything except the rhythm of her own body and the voices around her offering encouragement. Tom held her hand through the worst of it. You're doing great. Just keep breathing. I can't, Elena gasped. I can't do this. You can. You've survived everything else. This is just one more thing. One more thing, Elena laughed despite the pain. One more impossible thing. That's your specialty. Dr. Chen's voice cut through. Elena, I need you to push. On the next contraction, push as hard as you can. Elena nodded. She closed her eyes, gathered every ounce of strength she had left, and pushed. The pain was unimaginable. The effort was superhuman. But somewhere in the middle of it all, she felt David's presence. Not a ghost, not a memory, something more. A warmth that wrapped around her, steadying her, telling her she wasn't alone. She pushed again, and again. And then suddenly, a new sound filled the scene. A baby's cry. Elena collapsed back against the platform, tears streaming down her face. "Is the baby okay? Is the baby?" "She's perfect," Dr. Chen said. "A perfect little girl." A girl? Elena had a daughter. Dr. Chen placed the baby on Elena's chest, wrapped in a soft blanket. Tiny, red-faced. Screaming with the fury of someone who had just entered a world she didn't understand. Elena held her close, feeling the warmth of this new life against her heart. "Hello?" she whispered. "Hello, my love. I'm your mother." The baby stopped crying. Her eyes, unfocused but searching, seemed to find Elena's face. "I've been waiting for you, Elena continued. "Your father has been waiting too. He's not here the way we wanted him to be, but he's here. In these walls, in this place, in everything I'm going to teach you." Tom wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "What are you going to name her?" Elena had thought about this for months. She had considered dozens of names, rejecting each one until she found the one that fit. "Meadow," she said. "Her name is Meadow." "Meadow Heart," Tom said. "That's a beautiful name." It was the first thing David and I saw together. A meadow in the mountains full of wildflowers. He said it was the most peaceful place he'd ever been. Elena kissed her daughter's forehead. "I want her to carry that peace with her. Always." Dr. Chen finished cleaning up and gave Elena a thorough examination. "You did remarkably well. Both of you are healthy, but you need to rest. The next few days are going to be exhausting." "I know. I'll check on you tomorrow. And Elena?" Dr. Chen paused at the entrance. "Congratulations, David would be proud." "I hope so." After everyone left, Elena lay in the quiet of the cave with Meadow sleeping on her chest. The fire had burned low, casting soft shadows on the stone walls. The temperature was perfect as always. David's systems working exactly as he had designed. "Your father made this place for us," Elena whispered to her sleeping daughter. "He spent years getting it ready. He wanted us to be safe. He wanted us to have a home that couldn't be taken away." Meadow stirred but didn't wake. "I'm going to tell you about him every day. I'm going to show you his notebooks, his drawings, his ideas. And when you're old enough, I'm going to teach you everything he taught me." Elena's voice broke. "I wish he could see you. I wish he could hold you the way I'm holding you now." She closed her eyes and let the tears fall. But even through the grief, there was joy. Real, tangible joy. She was a mother, and she was not alone. The news of Meadow's birth spread quickly through the community. By the end of the week, the cave had become a gathering place for well-wishers. Maria brought homemade soup. Harold brought a wooden cradle he had carved himself. Tom brought supplies that would last for months. "You've got enough people looking out for you," he said. "You won't have to worry about a thing." "I wasn't worried," Elena said. "Not about that." "What were you worried about?" Elena looked at her daughter sleeping peacefully in the cradle Harold had made. "I was worried I wouldn't be enough, that I couldn't do this without David. And now I know I'm not doing it without him. He's here, in everything, in everyone who's helped us, in this place he built, in the community we're growing." Elena smiled. "I was never alone. I just couldn't see it." The following week, Detective Webb called with an update. "The arraignment went forward," he said. "Both suspects have been charged with first-degree murder. Trial is set for April." "April," Elena repeated. 4 months. "These things take time, but we have a strong case. The evidence is solid. The witness is credible." Webb paused. "There's more. The investigation into GridFirst is expanding. We found connections between the suspects and senior executives. This goes higher than we thought." "How high?" "High enough that the company's stock dropped 12% when the news broke. High enough that the board is considering a settlement." "A settlement?" "To avoid a civil trial. They know what's coming. They're trying to limit the damage." Elena felt a surge of anger. "They killed my husband. They don't get to limit the damage." "That's your choice, but you should talk to a lawyer before making any decisions." "I will." After hanging up, Elena sat with Meadow in her arms, processing what she had learned. Justice was coming. Real justice. The people who had killed David were going to face consequences, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the beginning of something much larger. February brought visitors of a different kind. Journalists started calling. News outlets that had ignored David's work for years suddenly wanted interviews. Magazines wanted to profile the cave widow. Television producers wanted to film documentaries. Elena said no to all of them. Why? Sarah asked during one of their weekly calls. This could be good for you, good for the community, good for David's legacy. Because they don't care about the legacy. They care about the story, the pregnant widow, the murder, the cave. It's entertainment to them. Not all of them. Enough of them. Elena shifted Meadow to her other shoulder. When I'm ready to share David's research, I'll do it on my own terms. Not for ratings, not for clicks, for the people who actually want to learn. You sound like him. I've been reading his notebooks for 6 months. Some of it was bound to sink in. Sarah laughed. Fair enough, but promise me you'll at least consider the serious offers. Some of them could really help spread the word. I'll consider them, when I'm ready. March arrived with the first signs of spring. Snow began to melt on the lower slopes. The days grew longer. Meadow was 2 months old now, growing stronger every day, developing a personality that reminded Elena of David in ways that made her heart ache. The girl was curious, watchful. Her eyes tracked movement with an intensity that seemed too focused for an infant. She rarely cried without reason, and when she did, she could usually be soothed by the sound of Elena's voice or the warmth of being held close. She's an old soul, Tom observed during one visit, like her father. I hope she got his brains, too. From what I've seen, she got the best of both of you. The trial began in April as scheduled. Elena made the trip to Denver, leaving Meadow with Maria and Tom for 4 days. It was the longest she had been away from her daughter, and every hour felt like a small eternity. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery. Cameras waited outside. The case had become national news, a symbol of corporate malfeasance, and the length some companies would go to protect their profits. Elena sat in the front row directly behind the prosecution. She wanted the defendants to see her. She wanted them to know whose life they had destroyed. The trial lasted 3 days. Evidence was presented. Witnesses testified. The hiker who had seen David with the 2 men took the stand and pointed directly at the defendants. "Those are the men I saw," he said. "I'm certain of it." The defense tried to create doubt. They argued coincidence. They suggested the witness was mistaken. They painted David as unstable, his research as fringe science with no practical value. Elena listened to it all, her hands clenched in her lap. When it was time for victim impact statements, she stood. "My name is Elena Hart," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "David Hart was my husband. He was a scientist, a visionary, a man who spent his life trying to help people prepare for a future most of us don't want to face." She looked at the defendants. Neither would meet her eyes. "You killed him because he threatened your profits, because his ideas, if they spread, would make people less dependent on companies like yours. You decided that money was more important than a man's life, more important than a family, more important than everything he had built." Elena felt tears on her cheeks but didn't wipe them away. "My daughter will never know her father. She will never hear his voice or feel his arms around her. She will grow up with stories and photographs and notebooks full of his handwriting, but she will never have him. You took that from her. You took that from both of us." She paused, gathering herself. "But you didn't destroy his legacy. His research survives. His ideas are spreading. The community he inspired is growing stronger every day. You killed the man, but you couldn't kill what he created. And as long as I'm alive, as long as our daughter lives, David's work will continue." Elena sat down. The courtroom was silent. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Elena wept when the verdict was read. Not from sadness. From relief. Justice. Finally, she called Tom from outside the courthouse. "It's over," she said. "They were convicted. I heard. It's all over the news." Tom's voice was warm. "How do you feel?" "Empty. Relieved. Sad." Elena wiped her eyes. "I thought this would feel like victory, but it just feels like the end of something." "Maybe that's what victory feels like, when it really matters." "Maybe." "Come home, Elena. Meadow misses you." "I'm on my way." The drive back to the mountains took 5 hours. Elena pushed through exhaustion, desperate to hold her daughter again. When she finally reached the cave, the sun was setting. The rock face glowed golden in the fading light. The wooden entrance stood solid and unchanged. Maria met her at the door, Meadow in her arms. "She's been asking for you, Maria said with a smile. In her own way. Elena took her daughter and held her close. The baby cooed, reaching for her mother's face. "I'm here," Elena whispered. "I'm home." The summer brought more changes than Elena had anticipated. The Resilience Cooperative had grown to over 100 members. Families from 3 counties had joined, drawn by the practical skills and the sense of community that David's vision had inspired. Elena found herself teaching almost daily. Workshops on thermal mass, demonstrations of water collection, discussions about food preservation and emergency preparedness. She was not a natural teacher. She stumbled over explanations and forgot details and sometimes had to admit she didn't know the answer, but people kept coming, and they kept learning. And slowly, the ideas that David had spent years developing began to take root in the world beyond the cave. In July, a publisher reached out, not a journalist looking for scandal, a university press interested in David's research. "We want to publish his notebooks," the editor explained during a phone call, "as a scholarly work, with your annotations and commentary, something that can be studied, referenced, built upon." Elena considered the offer carefully. She talked to Sarah. She talked to Tom. She talked to Dr. Chen and Maria and Harold and everyone else whose opinion she trusted. In the end, she said yes. David wanted this, she told the editor. He wanted his research to be shared. He just never got the chance to do it himself. "We'll make sure it reaches the right people," the editor promised.
This
work deserves to be taken seriously. The book was published in October. It was called Stone and Silence, A Manual for Resilient Living. David's name was listed as primary author. Elena's was listed as editor and contributor. The reviews were mixed. Some critics praised the work as groundbreaking, others dismissed it as survivalist fantasy, but the sales were steady, and more importantly, the ideas began to spread. Elena received letters from readers across the country, people who had built similar structures, people who had started their own cooperatives, people who had found hope in David's vision of a different kind of future. She read every letter, she answered as many as she could, and she felt for the first time that David's death had not been in vain. Meadow took her first steps on her first birthday. Elena had organized a small party at the cave. Tom and Maria, Dr. Chen, Sarah, who had flown in from Denver, a dozen other friends and neighbors who had become family over the past year. They gathered around as Meadow pulled herself up using the edge of the stone platform. She wobbled. She steadied. And then with a look of fierce concentration that reminded everyone of David, she took one step forward. Then another, then another. Elena swept her daughter into her arms, laughing through tears. "You did it," she said. "Your first steps in your father's cave. He would be so proud." Meadow giggled, completely unaware of the significance of the moment. But Elena knew, and she would remember this day for the rest of her life. That night, after the guests had gone and Meadow was sleeping, Elena sat by the fire and opened David's letter one more time. She had read it hundreds of times by now. She had memorized every word. But something about this moment, this anniversary, made her want to hear his voice again. "Find your people," he had written. "Build your community. Create the kind of life I was too afraid to fight for." Elena looked around the cave, at the stone walls that held the warmth, at the shelves filled with books and supplies, and the accumulated wisdom of a life dedicated to understanding. She had done it. Everything David had asked. She had found her people. She had built her community. She had created a life that honored his memory and carried his work forward. And she had done it while raising their daughter, while fighting for justice, while learning to live with grief that never fully disappeared, but slowly transformed into something softer. "I did it," she whispered to the letter. "I did everything you asked." She folded the paper carefully and placed it back in her pocket. Then she went to check on her daughter. 2 years later, Elena stood at the entrance of the cave and watched the sunrise. Meadow was 3 now, curious and fearless and constantly in motion. She knew the cave better than Elena knew every corner and crevice and hiding place. She had started asking questions about her father, questions that Elena answered as honestly as she could. The Resilience Cooperative had become something larger than anyone expected. A network of communities across the western states sharing resources and knowledge, preparing for a future that felt more uncertain every year. David's book was in its 5th printing. Universities had begun incorporating his research into environmental science curricula. The ideas he had developed alone in a cave were now being studied and debated and built upon by thousands of people he would never meet. Grid First Energy had settled the civil lawsuit for an undisclosed sum. The money had gone toward establishing a scholarship fund in David's name supporting students who wanted to study sustainable design. Margaret and Robert Hart had visited twice. The second time, Margaret had stayed for a week, learning to navigate the cave, helping with Meadow, finally understanding what her daughter had found in this impossible place. "I was wrong about David," Margaret had admitted on her last night. "I was wrong about everything." "You were scared," Elena had said. "We all were." "I'm not scared anymore. Not of this." Margaret had looked around the cave with something like wonder. "This is remarkable. This is real. It's home." Now watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink, Elena felt a peace she had once thought impossible. She had lost so much. A husband, a future she had imagined, a version of herself that no longer existed. But she had gained so much more. A daughter who carried David's spirit forward, a community that had become family, a purpose that gave meaning to every day, and a home that asked nothing more than her willingness to understand. Meadow appeared at the entrance, rubbing sleep from her eye. "Mama, why are you outside?" Elena scooped up her daughter and held her close. "I was watching the sunrise. Do you want to watch with me?" "Okay." They stood together, mother and daughter, as the light spread across the valley below. "Mama." "Yes, sweetheart." "Is Daddy watching too?" Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "Yes, baby, I think he is." "Good." Meadow nestled closer. "I want him to see." "See what?" "Everything. The mountains, the cave, us." Meadow looked up with David's eye bright and curious and full of wonder. "I want him to see how happy we are." Elena kissed her daughter's forehead. "He sees. He's always seen. And he's so, so proud of you." "And you?" "And me too." They watched until the sun cleared the peaks and the valley filled with light. Then they went back inside, back to the warmth and the silence and the life they had built together. The cave remained. Stone and silence. Heat and shelter, a testament to one man's vision and one woman's courage. David Hart had bought a piece of mountain for almost nothing and turned it into something priceless. Elena Hart had inherited that gift and transformed it into something even greater. Not just a home, a movement, not just survival, a way of life. The notebook that had started everything still sat on the stone platform where David had left it. Elena had added her own entries now, documenting the growth of the community, the lessons learned, the failures, and successes that came with building something new. Someday, Meadow would read those notebooks. She would learn about her father's work and her mother's journey. She would understand the sacrifice and the love that had gone into creating this place. And perhaps when she was ready, she would carry the work forward herself. The future was uncertain. It always had been. That was the truth David had tried to teach, the truth Elena had finally learned. But uncertainty was not the same as fear. The cave stood solid against whatever storms might come. The community grew stronger with each passing year. The research spread to minds that would build upon it in ways no one could predict. And in the heart of the mountain, a mother and daughter lived a life that defied every expectation. Simple, meaningful, true. Elena Hart had come to this place looking for answers about a husband she had lost. She had found something far more valuable. She had found herself. And in finding herself, she had discovered what David had known all along, that the most resilient structures are not built from stone alone. They are built from love, from community, from the courage to face an uncertain future without flinching. Elena closed the notebook and placed it on the shelf beside all the others. Meadow was playing in the main chamber, her laughter echoing off the walls her father had shaped. The fire was burning low, steady, reliable. Home. This was home. And nothing, not time, not loss, not all the storms the world could send, would ever take it away. Elena Hart had bought a cave for $250. She had built a life worth more than anything money could measure, and she had proven once and for all that some endings are really just beginnings in disguise. The stone held, the silence listened, the future waited, and Elena Hart was ready.